Utah has added an electric wide receiver to their core, and they just lost their starting center. All that on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube and wherever you may get your podcast. If this is your first time listening to our show, make sure you like and subscribe. Love interacting with all of you in YouTube comments as well as on social media, where you can follow our show at Locked On Utes on X. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and I'm a big fan of Monopoly Go. The mobile hit is a twist on classic Monopoly, so join your friends and download Monopoly Go. Now free on the App Store or Google Play. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. And on today's show, at the end, first, just right off the top, I want to congratulate the Utah Gymnastics team on advancing to the national championship this Saturday. It was going to be tough for them to do it because of the likes of Oklahoma being there, and they finished ahead of Florida even. So we'll talk about that at the end of the show, but lots happening because the transfer portal is up and running once again across college football, and Utah has been drastically affected by it already. We'll talk about what's going on at the center position for Utah, along the offensive line in the second segment. But first, I want to start with Utah adding an elite wide receiver. And I try not to be someone who every player Utah adds in the portal, I overreact and go, this guy is going to do this and he's going to be a difference maker. But it's hard not to be fired up as soon as you turn on the tape of former Syracuse wide receiver Damein Alford, as he is going to be joining the University of Utah football team. He's a 6'6" wide receiver, 210 pounds, the junior from Canada, lit it up last year with Syracuse. He had a single season career markless last year with 33 catches for 610 yards and 3 touchdowns. Started all 13 games as the team captain too, so it's something, of course, that Utah was looking for. He led the team in receiving yards with 610. 33 catches were the second most on the team and was really impressive. I mean, let's look at some of the individual efforts he had in that 610-yard seasons. He had 4 in the game against UCF for 83 yards. How about against Wake Forest? 4 for 126 and 2 touchdowns. I don't mind that stat line at all. And yeah, as I said, only had 3 touchdowns overall, but he's got a skill set that really excites me because we can go to the Virginia Tech game, right? He had 4 receptions for 70 yards against Army, 9 for 135. What's something you got to notice when you look at it? He only have like 4 catches, yet he's got a ton of yards. He averaged 18 yards a catch last year. He's a guy who can take the top off of defense. In several of his games last season, his longest catch was for 30-plus yards. This is a guy who has a chance to be a difference maker, and I'm really fired up about this addition. And as I said, I try not to be the guy who comes in here and say, oh, well, we'll see if this guy makes an impact. Based on what I see on film, which is a guy who has the chance to take the top off the defense, has speed, does a good job tracking the ball, can make contested catches, has a good size too, if you check the ball down to him, he shows off that speed and can get yards at a rapid rate too. If you just turn on the tape, to me, for what that showed, for what he was at Syracuse, it's always hard to project from one place to the next. I'm not trying to, because last year, Emory Simmons, obviously it didn't work out as we all thought it would with Utah, but it's hard not to envision this one going much better with what Alford has put on tape. I mean, he's a tremendous talent, and he's so good that when I say, okay, like who is he better than for Utah receivers? Like where does he rank? Or I should say, how many guys does Utah have that are clearly better? At the wide receiver position right now, I'm going to say one for sure, and it's Dorian Singer. He has a chance to be the team's second best receiver. Money Parks, Micah Pittman, Lyons, whoever you want to bring up and talk about, all talented receivers. I think Alford's ceiling, is extremely high because of the skill set and traits I just discussed. I'm incredibly high on his potential, and I don't think he comes to a place like Utah unless he thinks he has a chance to do something right away, because this is a guy who just played his last 3 years, right? He was able to redshirt his first year, but in 21, 22, and 23, he played all of them. So this is his 4th year coming up here, and yes, he's got his COVID year if he wanted to use it, but I'm sure this is a guy who would love to have a monster season, his potentially last one in college. It'll be his 5th overall and move on to the NFL draft potentially. And I think he looks at Utah and says, this offense wants to be better. They have a guy in Cam Rising coming back. I can help them be more explosive. And once again, when you just watch him work, it's hard not to think that he's going to play a role on this team come the fall. And you don't usually say that about wide receivers picked up this late in the game. And yes, there's all the aspects of he's got to pick up the playbook, and there are still a lot of things to be determined. And just because I said he has the potential to be better than a Money Parks, Munir McClain in that group too, a Micah Pittman, doesn't mean he's actually going to. But you don't find guys like this in the portal every single day. And this is the type of receiver with a stat line that doesn't usually come to Utah. And I think that shows you that, number one, I do believe this offense is going to be more committed to the aerial attack than they have been in the past because they have Cam Rising back, Dorian Singer, Brant Keithy, and now Alford can be a key part of that. I think this guy has a chance to be a difference maker for this team. And I'm going to be very interested to see if he plays, with Money Parks, or him and Money Parks going to be competing for that same spot, because they are both the guy who would take the top off the defense. And they're both tremendous enough receivers that they can play a multitude of roles. But I mean, I'm trying not to overreact, as I said, but when you just turn it on and watch, this might be the second best receiver on Utah's roster already, just if he's able to do what he did last year at Syracuse. And he did it against ACC defenses. I'm not going to act like those were world beaters, but neither of the defenses is going to be seated in the Big 12, right? So I think this is a big get. We were talking about, transfer portal for Utah earlier this week, right? And we talked about quarterbacks, and we talked about, now we'll talk about offensive line soon. We talked definitely linebackers, and maybe even a corner, like potentially, but I didn't see another receiver in the fold, because it was like, and yes, Utah was always in the position where you want to continue to, even if you think it's solid, you want to get stronger. A lot of colleges, if they had Utah's receiving core, I think they think it's good, but they'd still look in the portal. But for what we've been used to for the receivers, we looked at this year's receiver core like, this is tremendous. Like, we don't need to add anything else. This is already better than what we've got. But the coaches, Alvis Whitted and the rest of the staff, said we can do even better. And I think they bring in a guy in Alford who, as I said here, now is got a real shot to earn major snaps in the fall. I think there's going to be games where he is the difference maker. Also, I think there's going to be games where he leads the team in receiving yards. And if we want to freezing cold takes this by the end of the season, not that it would actually get picked up on that site, but if some of you want to look back and laugh at it after that, you are totally fine to do so. All I'm doing is turn on the tape. I go into these things when I watch these guys for the first time, wanting to like them, but never know what you're going to see out of them. And I mean, he's got his own highlight reel for a reason on the ACC network, because he had that many dazzling plays this past fall. So this just feels like a guy who's gotten better and better each year. Like, you look at 2022, caught 20 passes for 429 yards. Then this last year, 33 catches for 610 yards. If he's going to keep that current trajectory he's on, he'd had over 800 receiving yards. Do I think he'll have that with Utah? Probably not. Am I going to say it's out of the question he has that? No, not based on what he showed on film. If Utah can protect Cam Rising, there's a real shot that Alford can be this team's leader in yards per catch. He did it last year with Syracuse. He has the potential to be next to Money Parks, those two together, and what Alford's put on tape more recently overall, and it wasn't fair to say that about Money always, because if the quarterback's throwing it to him. But last year, Alford did have a better year, and he'll have a chance to be the second best receiver on this team. It's a tremendous get. The speed, the hands, the ability to change the direction, I think, is key to whenever you have a guy who can take the top off the defense and threaten them in that way. And that's a dynamic Utah hasn't always had. It's a game changer. And he's a guy, too, who, if you underthrow him, can come back and go up and make that impressive catch. And I think he's going to do that a lot in Rice-Eccles Stadium and when he's going after Big 12 defenses. So love this grab to get a guy in Damein Alford, who I think is going to be a tremendous asset to the Utah offense this fall. And it's good that Utah upgraded potentially at receiver, because the offensive line might have just gotten worse. We got to talk about Utah's starting center from last season, Koli, entering the transfer portal. We're going to be diving into that and why we think it happened. Where does Utah go from here? We got to get all of that out of the way in one moment. But first, I want to talk to you about one of the sponsors of today's episode of Locked On Utes, our friends at Monopoly Go. Monopoly Go is right here for you if you love your competitive side. And as we all know, I have a competitive side too. And that's why I'm a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great twist on Monopoly, where you play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you the big money. But the best part is messing with your friends. You can charge them rent on the iconic properties, just like a classic Monopoly game. But now you can also heist their vaults of riches and keep it for yourself too. And the leaderboard shows you who is the biggest Monopoly tycoon. But it's not just my competitive side that loves it. I can also team up with my friends if I'm tired of messing with them, and people around the world in time tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play Store. Also want to talk to you all about another sponsor of our episode of Locked On Utes today. It's our friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and so much more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. You can keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit. Only available to U.S. customers. All righty, from talking about a flashy position, the wide receiver spot, and Alford's a guy who could be a big difference maker for Utah this fall, potentially. Let's talk about another position for Utah that could also be a difference maker, and one potentially not on the positive side of things, because Utah just lost their starting center from last season for 8 of the team's games overall. He played in 11, but started 8 of them, and that is Koli Faaiu. And I apologize if I butchered that last name as well, but Koli is a guy who he started the spring game. Like, unless I'm wrong, I went back and watched the game a few times. I've specifically went back and identified the offensive line. He's number 61. 61 is taking the snaps. I think Koli started the spring game, and then after he transferred. It just feels weird, and I don't remember the timing of when Paul Miley did it last year. I think he did his after the season ended. But once again, it's just kind of the strange situation we find ourselves in, where why is a Utah center departing when they started last year? And could be a multitude of reasons for this. But I will say this. I mean, it was reported in spring ball that Johnny Maea is still out with an injury. I think Joe Coles of the Deseret News was one of the ones who reported that. And then, so Koli was still going to have the inside track potentially to starting at center. Either he didn't feel that was the case. I mean, in today's world, NIL could always play a role, right? I'm not claiming that is the reason. I'm just, whenever guys leave and you're like, that doesn't make sense, I think NIL is always a potential reason if we're looking for reasons why. Once again, I'm not saying that with insider information. I am just saying that as in that could potentially be a reason why a guy who was going to be a starter on what should be one of the 15 best teams in college football on paper, you guys can get him mad all you want, I think that's a fair statement, on paper, would decide to transfer. It just seems strange. But maybe Utah feels that there is someone better. And I don't know if it's Johnny Maea, who, like we said, was hurt last year. Jaron Kump, you could argue, but he played in guard a lot in the spring game. So, and the center experiment with him, I didn't feel like it went great last year, and guys can improve, but Kump's been here a few years now, and I think he is better served as a guard. And I mean, just in general, he's had his ups and downs as an offensive lineman in general at Utah like that. I'm not saying I'm against him starting, but he does need to continue to just make those improvements. And the only way we're going to see if he was able to make those is when he's on the field this fall. So, yeah, I mean, Koli's a loss for Utah. He was when you're losing Keaton Bills, Satawa Laumea, it helps to have a returning starter. And yes, Maea would still be one too. We only saw him play one game last year. Like, that is that doesn't exactly. And yes, like, that's more than a Cam Rising, but Cam Rising's played at such a high level. Like, do I think Utah will be fine at center? Probably. Am I surprised at this? I'm absolutely surprised. I did not expect Koli to transfer, especially when, once again, Maea is dealing with some injuries and we didn't get to see him a ton during the spring. So it's just kind of one of those just weird situation, hard to wrap your head around. It really is. And this could potentially be a key loss for Utah because the center is an important position. If I was to rank the importance of offensive line positions, I would go left tackle, right tackle, center, and then the guards don't matter as much to me. But I want the center in there, not just for the snapping, obviously, but, just calling out what the defense is doing, the leadership aspect that comes with it, because everything starts with the center. He literally has to snap the ball to start the play. And that's a leadership role on the offensive line. So it's just another hit for Utah that the only guy who is returning is Mokafisi with multiple years of starting experience. Because I remember Koli even got some run back in 22 before he was thrust in the starting spot for so much of 23. So in Jim Harding, we trust. If Maia gets back and healthy, which we expect him to be come the fall, the offensive line will still look something like a Caleb Lomu, whether it's Tongai or Jaron Kump at guard, Johnny Maia at center, Mokafisi at right guard, and then at right tackle, Spencer Fano. I feel pretty good. If Maia's back to full health, I feel really good about 3 of those spots. The 2 I don't feel as strong about are the 2 guards, and I know I said Mokafisi has the most experience, but he has that as ups and downs in both years as well too. I still think he's a solid offensive lineman, and in some ways he has more reps than a Lomu and a Fano and even a Maia, but I just think those guys have consistently, and I'm just expecting Fano to be better on the right side too. I'll say that's fair. I just think those guys, being younger, continuing to grow, get more opportunities. I feel like we still don't know where they are. And Mokafisi will get a little better. But in a lot of ways, we've seen so much of him. I feel like we got a pretty good grasp of what he is, which is a good offensive lineman, but he will get beat from time to time. All these guys do, but I feel like Mokafisi did more so than some of the other Utah offensive linemen last year. So, yeah, I mean, if you have, like I just said, I feel least strong about the 2 guards. So that's where I would want to feel great about the center spot. And I would have felt really good about Koli. I will say, I mean, Johnny Maia has beat out Koli before, so maybe if they felt like Maia got healthy again, maybe that's why Koli left. But it's a very fascinating and complicated situation up on the hill, I feel like, at the center position. So we'll see for Maia, right? He's a 6'4" guy, 315. He's been biding his time. Back in 22, played in 1 game, played in 7 games, in 22, played in 7 games with 2 starts, just played in 1 last year because of the injuries. So, and Utah's got a guy in Jaron Kump, who I think is a good backup center because, as I said, I don't love him as a starter, but if you're telling me he's one of your backups, that gets me excited. I think you don't have a lot of guys who are capable of being starters as backups. So just in general on your roster. So I think that would be a positive thing. But yeah, very surprised at Koli's departure. I'm very curious to see where he will end up at. It'd be funny. I don't know what BYU center position is, but it would be funny if he did a Paul Mile and just ended up going over to BYU too, because Koli is a guy too who I will say he's from Washington, so he could maybe want to go back there. But definitely a surprising. You see transfers. We'll talk about Sydney and Banasaur, Britton transferring. That'll be on Monday's show. Like those are like, okay, buried on the depth chart. Totally get it. Koli had a chance to start. He did start the spring game, started 8 games last season. And now he's gone. And like I said, I just don't think most people saw that coming. So maybe it's because of the depth chart. Maybe it's because of NIL. Maybe he wanted another opportunity, a fresh start. Who knows? But now the center position becomes more of an unknown for Utah because it's a weaker room rather than, if Johnny Maia and Koli were battling for it. And then okay, if Maia's healthy, he wins it. But then we don't have to worry about if he gets hurt because Koli's awesome. But now if Maia does get hurt, you do worry a little more about Jaron Kump. And as I said, I think he's a solid backup, but it will be harder for Utah to reach their goals if Jaron Kump is at center and performs at the level he did last year. Now, if he comes back and performs at a higher level, then Utah can absolutely do some of those things. But he had some rough moments in blitz pickup, him and Mokafisi did. So, and that's something last year the offensive line in general, honestly, they struggled with. So very curious to see how it gets better. Hopefully Maia will be back and healthy in the fall, because if not, we could look at this as a key loss for Utah, losing out on Koli, their starting center from a season ago. That's going to do it for our football talk of the week. As I mentioned, next week we'll do lots of transfer portal stuff still going on. Utah even landed a commitment from some other transfer guys that I want to break down too. But before we exit today, got to talk about this Utah Gymnastics team, because they just continue to surpass all the expectations set for them before the season. And they've held the standard that this program has lived up to for 48 years straight. And now they've made it to 4 straight national championship meets, not just nationals, but the national championship meets. So truly incredible. And I want to talk about their unreal performance tonight with all of you in one moment. But first, I want to talk to you about one of the sponsors of our episode in Locked On Utes, our friends at Gametime. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets to your next big event. And now they're an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. They have great last-minute deals, all-in-price views from your seats, and their low-price guarantee. Does truly take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. You can use their app that features all kinds of great things like flash deals, zone deals, and even views from your seat, so you know exactly what kind of deal you're getting. It's easy to find and buy MLB tickets for every kind of event in your area. They also have a low price guarantee, event cancellation, and job loss protection. That low price guarantee, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference if you find tickets in your section and row for less. Also, all-in pricing, toglining the feature shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. So you can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. You can download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEG with capital L-O-N-C of each word, Locked On and College. For $20 off, download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Alrighty, coming in to close this one out. Let's talk about some Red Rocks. I mean, my goodness, this team has been just so fun to watch this season, and it wasn't always smooth sailing, right? They had some losses earlier in the year. You know, they're 15-4. They were the 5th seed. Oklahoma was the 1 seed. You have Florida, who was seeded ahead of them, and then you had Alabama, who was another team that was a threat. And Utah, despite having Oklahoma, they had to face off against, and Oklahoma won it all last year. Looked like they were going to go back-to-back. But gymnastics is a wild sport because they had some early stumbles, and literally that's what makes gymnastics so insane to me, is that you can fall twice, make 2 early mistakes, and that's it. And yes, I know in like football, like, well, obviously if you throw 2 interceptions, but like if you false start twice in a game, you're fine. That's not gymnastics. Like if you don't land 2 routines, or like not perfectly, but like if you fall off on beam, bars, whatever it may be, like if you have 2 players do that because you drop the lowest score, you're basically done. And like that's what happened to Oklahoma early. They had 2 people fall, and that was all, folks, for them. And you know what wasn't that's all for is Utah. They led after the first rotation, crushing on beam 49, 6, 3, 7, 5, and they just kept it going from there, right? On floor, they had 49, 5, 8, 7, 5, on vault 49, 200, and on bars 49, 5, 125. And against, once again, very steep competition. And Utah was the best of these 4 top 10 teams, all in attendance. So impressed by what this group does, whether it's Emil Morgan, McKenna Smith leading the way on bars too. Obviously Smith also standing out on floor too, but especially Jalen Gildstrap earning that 9.95, Miley O'Keefe earning a 9.95. How about Grace McCollum with the 9.92? I mean, just tremendous. Then you go over to vault, right? You have McKenna Smith with the 9.9, and you look up and down this roster, right? Zerbees with the 9.92, or how about bars even? McKenna Smith with the 9.9 again, Zerbees with the 9.9, Morgan with a 9.9, and Sabdo, with the 9.9 as well. So just impressive what Carly Dockendorf has been able to do at the helm for this Utah gymnastics team. The Red Rocks shocked the world. They won it, at least this regional, and now they have a chance to move on and play for a national championship, right? Like, it is crazy to pull up, the tweets from the various reporters out there, right? Like I found Josh Furlong's here, where Utah's 5, and you see Utah and Florida both above Oklahoma. And now Utah's going on to play for a national championship yet again. Amidst all the coaching changes and everything, and that happened here. Credit this team, this group that came together and gets it done on a monster performance down in Texas. So they'll be going forward all this Saturday. We'll have it covered come next week on Locked On Utes, and we appreciate all of you for tuning in here. Congrats to the Utah gymnastics team. Best of luck this weekend. If you guys are curious about more things in the transfer portal, whether that's for football or men's basketball, is everything happening with Utah athletics just in general, you have questions, leave them in the comments below. Would love to try to answer as many as I can. We'll definitely be talking about a lot of the stuff happening, particularly the transfer portal, and if Utah won a national championship in gymnastics on next week's Locked On Utes. We look forward to seeing you then. Have a great weekend, everyone. And as always, go Utes.